I was my underworld boss's best brother. But I secretly loved him. After he died, I raised his son. I never expected this kid to not respect me as an elder. He barged into my hotel room, grabbed the young boy kneeling by my bed by the hair, threw him out, and asked coldly, "Not planning to stay faithful to my dad?" I warned sharply, "Albert." Instead of being afraid, he went crazy and pinned me to the bed. "Then you might as well let me do it." Chapter 1. Albert sat on a pile of steel scraps in the alley, reading a book in his school uniform. Not far behind him, a fierce fight was underway. The sound of fists hitting flesh mixed with muffled groans of pain. If the scene weren't so incongruous, I might have genuinely believed he was focused on his studies. I waved my hand, signaling the subordinates behind me rolling up their sleeves to stand down, and retreated back around the corner. 20 minutes ago, Jim had rushed into my office in a panic, telling me Albert was in a fight. Thinking Albert was different from his father. He was a good student who never caused trouble. I was afraid he'd get hurt and urged the driver to speed all the way there. I didn't expect the situation to be completely the opposite of what I imagined. "Enough," came Albert's cold voice from inside. Though reluctant, the young men fighting on his behalf obediently stopped and left. I stopped them a bit further away and asked what had happened. They clamored to tell me that the guy was a pervert whose obsession with Albert had become abnormal. He stalks Albert every day and even sent really explicit love letters. At noon today, Albert was napping in our dorm, and he snuck in. If we hadn't caught him early, his hand would have been in Albert's pants. Disgusting. My face turned green as I listened. After they left, I loosened my tie and tucked it into my shirt, intending to teach that guy a lesson myself. But then I saw Albert deep in the alley, lifting the guy's chin with the tip of his shoe, asking, "You say you like me?" I stopped in my tracks. The guy was truly insane. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, yet he was smiling. "It's not like, it's love, Albert. I love you," Albert said. "But we are both men. That's true love." The guy, pinned underfoot, looked increasingly fanatical. "Defying worldly norms is the most precious thing. Albert, besides me, who would bear the world's condemnation for you?" "Is that so?" Albert mused. "That seems to make sense." The guy's eyes lit up, and he clutched Albert's pant leg tightly. "So, Albert, will you give me a chance?" Albert lowered his long lashes to look at the hand, a beautiful smile appearing on his face. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle. "Thank you for helping me figure things out." Hearing this, the guy's smile had just begun to bloom when it froze. Two screams echoed in the alley. The first was because Albert crouched down and broke the fingers gripping his pant leg. The second was because Albert stood up and expressionlessly kicked his ribs in. The setting sun shone on Albert, a heavy gold blurring his silhouette. For a moment I was dazed. Edmund had been a ruthless fighter back in the day. People in the underworld feared him and called him the jade-faced Yama. I had always thought that while Albert was cold, he was ultimately a scholar who hadn't inherited much of Edmund's ruthlessness. I never expected he hid it so well. Since I couldn't help, I took him home. I left people specifically to handle the aftermath. At dinner that night, I said to Albert, "Don't worry. That kind of pervert will never appear in front of you again." "Pervert?" Albert suddenly stared at me. "Uncle Carlos, don't you like men too?" I was stunned by the question. Even though it was almost the year 2000 and the century was about to turn, liking men was still considered shameful. His father, Edmund, hated it, saying that a perfectly good man thinking about screwing another man all day was pure psychological perversion. Because of that, I never dared to reveal my feelings for him. Albert continued, "Don't you like my dad?" I shuddered, my voice pitching up an octave. "Don't talk nonsense. How is that possible?" To change the subject, I kept putting food in his bowl. "Stop talking and eat more. You're growing. Don't eat so little, it'll affect your development." Albert picked at his rice casually. "I'm an adult. Still developing?" I paused. "Huh." Albert looked at me like that and smiled inexplicably. "How else do you want me to develop, Uncle Carlos?" For a moment, I suspected the kid was making a dirty joke. But looking up, I saw him pick up a shrimp and peel it carefully. His serious and elegant manner made me ashamed of my thoughts. "What's wrong?" He held up the peeled shrimp meat. "Want some?" As he spoke, he brought it directly to my mouth. I instinctively opened my mouth to bite it, and he fed me several more in succession, unaware of when he had peeled them all. Pitched. Soon my mouth was stuffed, and I couldn't even chew fast enough, only able to refuse vaguely. "All right, you eat yourself." His hand reached out again. I opened my mouth helplessly, but this time I didn't bite the shrimp. I bit directly onto Albert's finger. I froze, then watched as he casually withdrew his hand, put the finger I had bitten into his mouth to lick it, and then picked up the hot towel on the table to wipe his hand. "You ate them all," Albert said. Cough. My mind was still on that glimpse of his pink tongue. I quickly looked away and took a big gulp of water. "I told you to eat more, but you insisted on stuffing me. It's okay." A trace of a smile flashed in Albert's eyes. One I suspected was an illusion. "I just like feeding you things I've peeled." While showering, I suddenly realized the ring Edmund gave me was missing. That ring was originally worn by Edmund. One day, noticing I kept staring at it, he took it off and gave it to me. Actually, I didn't really like the ring itself. I just had an absurd thought in my heart. If only I could be like that ring, frequently rubbed by Edmund's beautiful hands. At the time, I declined, saying it was too valuable to accept. He laughed. "Best brothers care about this? If you like it, take it." With that, he pulled my hand over and slid the ring onto my index finger. My heart pounded fiercely in that moment, absurdly feeling like we were exchanging rings, my face burning hot. When did the ring go missing? I remembered Albert saying he wanted to see it a few days ago, and I took it off for him. Later, there was urgent business at the company, and after that, did he give it back to me? Just then, Albert came in. I asked, "Have you seen my ring?" "What ring?" Albert raised an eyebrow. "The love token between you and my dad?" There was no getting around this topic. I said helplessly, "If it were a love token, where would your mom and you come from?" Albert said expressionlessly, "What's strange about that? It's not like he only had my mom as a lover. I mean, he only liked women. Never mind. Did you return the ring you looked at before?" "Returned it. Strange." I turned the bathroom and room upside down, even lying on the floor with a flashlight looking under the bed, but found nothing. I stood up in disappointment. Albert asked, "Find it." I shook my head, sat on the edge of the bed, and took out a cigarette in annoyance. "Stop looking." Albert bent down, obediently offering a lighter. "If you like rings, I'll buy you one. Come on. Where would you get the money?" I smiled, not wanting him to think I cared too much about his dad's stuff, so I dropped the subject and took a deep drag. Albert snapped the lighter shut and put it back in his pocket. I wanted to ask where he got the lighter and if he had learned to smoke, but as my gaze swept over him, I realized, tisk, truly the age of vigor. I bit the cigarette holder and smiled. "Did you peek at something you shouldn't have?" Loose sweatpants couldn't hide the shape. Looks like he developed well. "What counts as something I shouldn't see?" Albert's tone was calm. "Does you sticking your butt out in front of me just now count?" I almost choked on the smoke. "Who taught you that?" I kicked his calf. "You dare tease even your uncle?" "Wouldn't dare." Albert didn't dodge, his bones hard as rock. He took the kick and stood perfectly straight. He seemed to smile slightly, looking down to ask, "Uncle Carlos, the light in my room is broken. Can I sleep here tonight?" Chapter 2. Albert was afraid of the dark, but he wasn't clingy. When Edmund died, Albert was 12. He never asked me to sleep with him, but he always kept a nightlight on. When I had time, I would sleep next to him. He would settle down beside me, insisting on being very close, lying on his side with his face buried in my chest, biting the fabric of my shirt, often soaking a large patch of it. When I was busy, I would still check on him before bed. Sometimes he slept fitfully in the dim light, needing me to gently pat him to relax. There was a reason Albert feared the dark. When he was very young, Edmund took him out to dinner, and they got caught in a gang fight. In the chaos, Edmund shoved him under the table. "Don't make a sound. Don't move." Albert hugged his knees and hid in the darkness under the tablecloth, motionless. Outside, blades flashed, and someone fell in front of him, staring straight at him through the gap in the tablecloth. Blood spread and soaked the soles of his shoes, but he still didn't make a sound or move. When it was over, everyone forgot about him. I wasn't with Edmund that day. It wasn't until he came home bandaged up that I realized with a start. "Where's Albert?" Edmund slapped his thigh. "Damn it!" It was late at night. I rushed to the smashed-up restaurant, lifted the tablecloth, and saw little Albert looking up, his eyes hollow and numb. My heart aching, I picked him up. "Let's go home, Albert. Don't be afraid. I'm here to get you." Albert remained quiet. It was a long time before I realized my shirt was wet. He was silently crying in my arms, biting my clothes, shedding so many tears. Back then, he was just a child. It didn't matter if I held him, coaxed him, or kissed his face. But now he was a grown man, his body lean and powerful. Having him pressed tightly against me in bed made me very uncomfortable. I patted his hand gently. "Aren't you hot?" "I'm scared, Uncle Carlos. Shall I turn on the light?" "No, it's too bright, you won't be able to sleep." Albert buried his face in the crook of my neck. "This is fine." I had to ignore the heat behind me and close my eyes to count. I slept poorly and had a dream that was too real. Someone was rubbing against me from behind, breathing heavily. I was anxious and hot, unable to stop myself from moaning until a hand covered my mouth. "Legs together," the person commanded, manipulating my legs. A numbness washed over me, and I unconsciously clenched the blanket. "Uncle Carlos." The panting was like a wet, hot tongue licking my ear. I fell into a sticky chaos. When I woke up the next day, Albert was still holding me from behind. A man's morning reaction was too obvious. The moment I moved slightly, he instinctively thrust forward. I froze. The dream last night was embarrassing enough, and being provoked first thing in the morning was too much. I threw him off in disgust and dived into the bathroom. I had just dealt with a traitor in the basement. The guy was tough and my knuckles were red. Stepping out of the elevator, I saw Albert standing at the office door. He was wearing his school uniform and carrying a backpack, clean as a blank sheet of paper. Standing in the hallway of this neon-lit casino, he looked completely out of place. I took the cigarette out of my mouth and kicked the guy next to me. I said to announce it when the young master comes. "Did you think I was joking?" "No, I couldn't stop him." "Don't blame him, Uncle Carlos." Albert spoke up for him. "I wanted to see you." Seeing him reminded me of that ambiguous dream, and I felt inexplicably irritable. Albert walked over, reaching out to touch my chest. I instinctively blocked him, but he went around my hand, lowered his head, and started buttoning my shirt. Only then did I realize several buttons had popped open during the fight earlier. After buttoning it, he smoothed my clothes, his hand deliberately brushing over sensitive areas of my chest through the fabric. I shuddered and grabbed his wrist. He looked at me with those beautiful, calm eyes. "Uncle Carlos, why haven't you come home these past few days?" "Busy," I answered simply. It wasn't that I was busy. I just didn't want to face him. I raised him myself, and after Edmund died, I treated him like my own son. How could I have those kinds of thoughts about him? Even a single physiological reaction was a betrayal of him calling me uncle. "Busy with what? So busy you can't come home?" he pressed. I let go of his hand. "I'll be back when I'm done. You go back first. This isn't a place you should be." I thought he would listen, but this time he went against me. "I'll wait for you. I'll leave whenever you're done and go back with me." This kid was getting bold, harder and harder to figure out. I frowned at him for a few seconds, but he wasn't afraid at all. Annoyed, I said, "Suit yourself," and turned into my office. I had a social engagement that night, so I changed clothes and went out. From the restaurant to the nightclub, Albert actually followed me the entire night. He wouldn't enter the private room, just stood outside waiting. Every time I opened the door, I saw him staring at me, silent but stubborn. When I went to the restroom, he followed too. I laughed in anger. "Do you want to hold it for me while you're at it?" Unexpectedly, he really came over, reaching his hand toward me. I was so scared I pushed him away, glaring at him and cursing, "Crazy! Get lost! Can't pee!" Albert glanced down expressionlessly, then made a soft H sound, like coaxing a child. Damn it! My face burned. I abandoned the urinal, ducked into a stall and slammed the door. That brat, acting lawless just because I treated him well. I'd have to sort him out sooner or later. Drinking was inevitable at these events. By the time it ended, my steps were floating. A waiter named Jesse helped me to a room upstairs. Jesse was delicate looking. I had helped him out when guests gave him trouble before. He seemed to know my orientation and had tested the waters a few times. I knew he wanted to follow me, but I didn't expect him to be this bold, kneeling directly in front of me to unbuckle my belt while I was dizzy. I hadn't had anyone around me for years. After Edmund left, the situation was complicated, and I was busy legitimizing the gang's business, with no time to think about these things. Plus, liking men wasn't something I could show openly. It was hard to meet the right person, and if I didn't, I couldn't be bothered to look. Unknowingly, I had been celibate for years. I thought of Albert again, feeling that maybe I really had been abstinent for too long and should occasionally let off steam. I grabbed Jesse by the hair and looked at him. He softly called me Mr. Carlos, so I pressed his face toward me. Just as the zipper was pulled down, the door burst open with a bang. Albert walked in with a dark face, grabbed Jesse by the hair without a word, and slammed his head against the edge of the bed. Jesse screamed and was thrown out. The door slammed shut heavily, shaking the whole room. I raged, "What are you crazy about?" Albert glanced at my crotch and asked coldly, "Is this the reason you didn't come home? Not planning to stay faithful to my dad? What nonsense are you talking about? Or are you just desperate?" "Albert," I warned sharply, "then you might as well let me do it." As he spoke, he pushed me onto the bed, his knee rudely forcing my legs apart as he knelt between them, yanking my pants halfway down. I sobered up instantly, kicked him away, scrambled up, and roared, "You're crazy! Do you know who I am?" "Of course I know." Albert's expression was calm, but his words made me want to vomit blood. "You're my dad's brother, the person who wanted to climb into my dad's bed." Furious, I slapped him. My palm stung with pain. Albert's face turned to the side, motionless for a long time. A bright red handprint appeared on his face, and blood seeped from the corner of his mouth. I took a deep breath, pulled up my pants, and lit a cigarette. When the cigarette burned out, I calmed down a bit, feeling I had hit him too hard. My heart ached, wanting to touch his face. "I'm sorry," I sighed. "Albert, I didn't raise you well." Was it really a case of the apple not falling far from the tree? But I never showed interest in men in front of him. Edmund hated homosexuality so much. If he could see this from heaven, he would definitely come down and hack me to death. "I'm not your son," Albert looked at me calmly. "You have no obligation to teach me. But I've always seen you as a son." "Is that so?" Hearing this, Albert's eyes flickered, and then he smiled. "Then why did you break free from my arms and hide in the bathroom to shower a few mornings ago? Who was I in your heart at that moment?" Who else could it be? It was Albert, Edmund's son, the child of the man I loved and another woman. His features were blurred yet clear, both like and unlike him. As Albert grew up, I couldn't help staring at him, trying to find traces of Edmund's younger self in his face. Did I really treat this 18-year-old boy as a substitute? I didn't know. I only knew that falling in love with a man was abnormal enough. If I really sought comfort from this man's son, that was my own business, a secret hidden in my heart. I wouldn't actually do anything, and I certainly shouldn't drag him down. Young people aren't mature yet. They are easily impulsive and can't distinguish between dependence, need, passion, and true affection. I thought it was time for Albert to leave. According to the plan, he was supposed to go abroad for studies. I spent my life fighting and killing, my hands stained with many things. Although I was considered a businessman now, him staying by my side was ultimately not the best choice. Chapter 3. I wanted to find Albert and have a good talk. But since that night, for about a month, we hadn't eaten at the same table or had a proper conversation. I could never find the right opportunity. Jesse, on the other hand, sought me out a few more times. But that mood had passed, and I wasn't interested. I advised him to find someone else. No matter how unwilling he was, he had to let it go. Later, news must have leaked somehow, because Albert finally came to find me. He barged into my office and asked point blank, "Uncle Carlos, are you sending me abroad?" He was on break, not wearing his uniform. Dressed in a jacket and jeans, he looked very young. I put down my pen and looked at him across the desk. "You don't even knock before entering now?" Albert pursed his lips. "Are you throwing me away again?" I said, "It's not throwing you away. You've grown up. It's time for you to make your own way." Albert looked at me helplessly yet stubbornly. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. I sighed, got up, walked over to him and pried open his fingers one by one. "I'm doing this for your own good. What good is it staying by my side? You're so smart. You should go see the bigger world. This city is big enough. Besides, I'm just one person. How much space can I take up?" "Albert," I said helplessly. He suddenly grabbed my hand and asked, "Are you sending me away no matter what?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Fine," he sneered. "Since you want me to be obedient, you should give me some benefits." Albert kissed me forcefully. His voice was cold, the rims of his eyes red, but his lips were burning hot like fire. The new company had just been listed. Located on a high floor of a premium office building, it had a 180-degree panoramic glass window. He kissed me and pushed me toward the window. The window was open, and my upper body was pressed out over the edge. The wind roared in my ears, and the entire city lay beneath my feet. "Blame me for being born wrong," Albert whispered, biting my neck. I shouldn't have been his son. His hands controlled me, and his lips moved to my chest, biting and sucking through my shirt. Shall I call you Daddy? That way you can't shake me off. You'll have to be responsible for me for life. In broad daylight, at that moment, it felt like the whole city was watching. Watching this young man who called me Daddy hold me. Watching him kiss me until I couldn't stand steady. My heart beat wildly, like I was falling endlessly. Enough, Albert. I heard myself say hoarsely. Albert seemed not to hear. I kneed him hard in the groin. He doubled over in pain, finally letting go of me. I gasped for breath and said to him, "You're still young. When you grow up, you'll realize many feelings are wrong. Many things that seem huge now are actually just..." "Have you grown up?" Albert interrupted me. "Have you realized your feelings for my dad were wrong?" I froze. "I don't need you to teach me this." Albert's face was pale, his expression returning to its usual indifference, but the tears in his eyes betrayed him. "Carlos," he called my name word by word, seemingly for the first time. "If you don't want me, then I don't want you either." My hand paused while reaching for a cigarette. I didn't speak. By the time white smoke curled from my mouth, Albert was gone. Soon, it was the anniversary of Edmund's death. 6 years ago, he was set up by another member of the gang and died at sea. Even his body couldn't be found. I bought him a good plot in the cemetery and erected an empty tomb. For the first 2 years, I visited often. Later, as things got busy, I came less. In the last 2 years, I only came once a year. I was on that boat when Edmund met his end. I remember him desperately protecting me amidst the hail of bullets, cupping my face with blood-stained hands, saying anxiously, "Didn't you have many ideas, many ambitions? Didn't you tell me times are changing and we can't always rely on fighting and killing in the gang? Carlos, I haven't read a single book and don't understand what you said, but you're so smart, you can definitely do it. They're after me. With me attracting their attention, you have a chance to run. Go, go, go realize those things you talked about." I shook my head desperately, saying I didn't want to. "Without you, what meaning is there in doing those things? If we die together." He slapped me hard, trying to wake me up, then hugged me tightly. "I hate hearing talk about dying together the most. Carlos, listen to me. I want you to live well." Explosions erupted everywhere on the boat. He put the only remaining life jacket on me and pushed me into the sea with all his might. For more than 2,000 nights after that, I dreamed countless times of those few short seconds when he pushed me away and I fell into the sea. The sea wind was strong, thick smoke rolled, and a fire ignited behind him, illuminating his face for a moment. His face was covered in blood, but I knew he was smiling at me. Before I fell, I heard him say, "I'm very happy to be brothers with you in this life." After I fell, he shouted loudly, "Don't give up, Carlos, don't die." I really survived, but when I first escaped, I still felt living was meaningless. My parents were rotten people. Giving birth to me seemed like a prank of theirs, just to bring another person into the world to suffer. Finally, one night I ran away from home. In a nearby alley, I ran headfirst into Edmund. That wasn't our first meeting. Before that, I had accidentally stumbled upon him being chased by enemies. I helped him hide and carried him, covered in blood, to a clinic. He said he owed me a big favor. He helped me up as I was about to fall, asked what happened, and then told me, "It's okay. Don't be scared. I'll handle it for you." Edmund set fire to that house, so my parents naturally perished in the flames, and no one investigated. From then on, I followed Edmund. We went through life and death together, bleeding and sweating for each other. I met Edmund at 15. I never expected that after saving him once when we first met, he would eventually repay me with his life. Edmund was my only tie to this world. He didn't know how important he was to me. Without him, I wouldn't have a future, let alone plan for one. My petty cleverness, how could it be called great ambition? If I really had any, it was just wanting to walk out of the darkness with him and live a bright life. After Edmund left, my spiritual pillar collapsed. I was conflicted. He risked his life to let me live, saying he wanted me to live well, so I didn't dare die. But not daring to die didn't mean I wanted to live. I ran home from the hospital, locked myself in my room, sat there without eating or drinking, not knowing what to do with this life. It seemed that as long as I remained still, time would stop too. Until one day, the door creaked open, light shone in, and Albert stood in the light. He was only 12 then, but there was no childishness on his face. He asked me, "Uncle Carlos, are you throwing me away too?" I sat on the floor looking up at him. His expression was unusually calm, not at all like a child his age should have. My lips trembled, and tears instantly gushed out. That was the first time I cried out loud after Edmund left. After hugging Albert and crying, he asked again. I cooked instant noodles. Do you want a bite? After eating, I said to Albert, don't worry, I won't throw you away. Albert nodded and said, okay, then I won't throw you away either. After that, I avenged Edmund, took the position of gang leader, established myself and slowly legitimized the gang's business. And Albert grew up day by day like this. Sitting in front of Edmund's tombstone, I burned paper money while saying, I still didn't bring that kid Albert to see you this year. Don't know if you're curious. Anyway, he's an adult now, and lately he's been especially infuriating. Almost angered me to death. Sigh. I sighed. The wind blew up the ashes from the basin, covering my face. I wondered if Edmund was expressing dissatisfaction, thinking I had led his son astray. Actually, the father and son didn't have a deep relationship. After Edmund died, Albert never visited once. According to him, it was just a stone, nothing to see. But I could understand. No matter how loyal Edmund was to his brothers, it couldn't change the fact that he wasn't a good father. Albert's mother was named Abby, one of the girlfriends Edmund had dated. They got together fast and broke up fast. Their feelings were like lightning, gone in a flash. Edmund never knew she secretly gave birth to a child until she brought him to our door, shocking him deeply. That year, Albert was 5, Edmund was 23, and I was even younger, only 17. Abby became a mother at 18. She was young and careless then. Her pregnancy wasn't obvious, and she thought she was just gaining weight. When she found out, the months were far along, so she had to grit her teeth and give birth to the child. She regretted it as soon as she gave birth. She never let Albert call her mom, telling outsiders Albert was her younger brother. She loved to play and had many boyfriends, some of whom disliked Albert being in the way. After reluctantly raising Albert for 5 years, she finally couldn't stand this little burden and wanted to return him to his biological father. That day, Edmund asked impatiently, how do I know if you're lying to me? If you are, wouldn't I become a sucker? Abby glared at him viciously. If you don't believe me, go to a paternity test. Anyway, I've taken care of this child for you for 5 years. Now it's your turn. 5-year-old Albert stood aside, listening expressionlessly. Later, Abby left. Edmund searched the entire city but couldn't find her. Heard she went abroad with a rich boss, picked up by a luxury car when she left, looking glamorous. And Albert was like a speck of dust she brushed off when changing into new clothes. It was also that year Edmund took Albert to dinner, ended up being provoked in the restaurant, got into a fight, and forgot Albert under the table. Maybe that incident started things off on the wrong foot, and Albert and he could never get close after that. Edmund himself didn't know how to get along with his son, often dumping him on me as if escaping. Saying I treated Albert like a son wasn't taking advantage of Edmund. After all, I really did pick him up and drop him off at school, carried his backpack, attended parent-teacher meetings, and let him sleep on my back. I felt Albert was right. He won't throw me away. So, it was he who let me find support in this world again. We both needed each other's need. I just didn't expect that as time passed, his need turned into something else. Sigh. I sighed again, throwing the last stack of paper money into the fire basin. This time I didn't dare speak out loud, only reciting silently in my heart. Sorry, Edmund. I really didn't teach him those things. Just as I was staring at the flames in a daze, a subordinate came over with a bulky mobile phone. I pressed the answer button, and Jim's anxious voice came from the receiver. Boss, Master Albert is missing. Chapter 4. Albert was missing. He had been kidnapped. But in this city, there was no one I couldn't find. By that night, I had precise information. I initially thought it was some rival gang ignoring the code and targeting family, but it turned out to be a young punk named Keith. I had no impression of this person until I saw his photo and realized he was the one who had harassed Albert, gotten beaten up by Albert's friends, and finally had his ribs kicked in by Albert. At the time, I had someone handle the aftermath. Seeing he was injured badly enough and fearing further beating might kill him, Jim had simply given him a fierce warning. Most people would have been scared off by then. Although the gang had been trying to do legitimate business these years, the underworld was still the underworld. Few dared to truly provoke us. This kid Keith really had some nerve. No, not nerve. When I walked onto that abandoned fishing boat, all my anxiety, worry, and anger toward Keith turned into a single curse. Fuck, this guy is mentally ill. He had stripped Albert messily and tied him to a chair, while he himself was dressed impeccably. I saw him stroking Albert's face, tender as water 1 second. Albert, my baby, how long are you going to hold out? The next second, he was manic. Beg me. Hurry up and beg me. He grabbed Albert by the hair. Baby, I don't want to force you. As long as you ask for me, I definitely. Bang. I was furious and kicked him several meters away. Even breaking the wooden stick I grabbed didn't quell my anger. But it didn't matter. I had to get Albert home first. Keith had fed Albert a potent drug, wanting to watch Albert be tortured by desire until he lost control and begged, tearing off his cold mask to reveal raw animal instinct, so Keith could dominate him from above just once. But Albert held on stubbornly, preferring to endure until death rather than speak, rather than give him what he wanted. In the car, Albert was drenched in sweat, leaning almost collapsed against my shoulder. He called my name once, and when I answered, he buried his face deeper, his lips pressing against the skin of my neck, his breath scalding hot, making my heart race with fear. We finally made it home. As soon as the door closed, Albert pushed me and kissed me. His tongue aggressively pried open my teeth. For a moment, my legs seemed to give way, and he actually tackled me forcefully to the floor. Don't, MMPH, don't do this. I dodged his kisses wretchedly, grabbing his jaw hard to push him away. His eyes were so red they looked like they were burning, his chest heaving violently, sweat sliding down his skin. I dared not look directly at the desire in his eyes. Looking a second longer felt dangerous. I'll call a doctor for you, okay? I said. Don't bother the doctor. Albert gritted his teeth, veins bulging on his forehead. I'd rather endure until death. I knew he could do it. As long as he wanted to, he could always find a way to force me. After all, he dared to shoot himself when he was just a teenager. That year was the 3rd year after Edmund was buried. I finally found the chance to avenge him. The man was driven to desperation and seriously injured me before he died. I walked before the gates of hell, but Albert didn't give me a single kind look. He looked at me coldly and said, "To avenge him, are you willing to throw away even your life?" I explained, "It was an accident. I didn't want this either." Albert pursed his lips and said, "Then can you please not get hurt again in the future?" I had already promised him, saying, "Okay," but he still felt it wasn't enough. He suddenly snatched the gun and pulled the trigger before I could react. A bloody hole appeared on his shoulder. I was shocked and in pain, but he seemed not to feel it, letting the bright red liquid gush from the hole. "Uncle Carlos, you said we depend on each other for life, so our lives are connected, and our pain is connected. When you get hurt, I hurt this much." Even then, he knew how to force me to learn to cherish my life. Because he knew I couldn't forget the blood all over him, couldn't forget him saying, "When I get hurt, he hurts this much. I'll help you with my hand." Finally, I sighed and compromised, knowing clearly as I spoke that this was just a self-deceiving excuse. Albert's tears suddenly rolled down, smashing onto the floor drop by drop. He kissed me, holding on as if grasping the last straw. The root of my tongue went numb, and gradually even my brain lost sensation, as if I had inhaled some kind of drug, falling into dizziness and fever. His features, bearing some resemblance to a face in my memory, still deeply stimulated me. When I met Edmund, he wasn't much older than Albert was now. "Carlos." Albert bit me hard, trying to snap me back to reality. He said, "Say my name." I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. When happy, when angry, when my heart ached for him, when scolding him, I could call his name at any time. Except in this moment. I couldn't do it. I was ashamed to face it. I hooked my arm around Albert's neck and pressed his head into the crook of my neck. "Don't talk. Let's neither of us talk." Perhaps it was then that Albert's tears began to surge out. Accompanied by his loss of control and tears, I felt like I was going crazy too, my heart beating so fast it felt like it would leap out of my chest. Albert pushed me onto the altar table, right below Edmund's black and white photo hanging on the wall. The table shook and items crashed to the floor. Albert went too far, using his tie to bind my hands and choking my neck from behind, forcing me to look up at the photo on the wall. Sweat stung my eyes. Through the blur, I saw Edmund smile, as if he were watching me too. Watching this absurd and chaotic giving and taking. "Relax, you're too tense." Albert seemed to be sneering. His hand on my waist suddenly exerted force, making me frown in pain. "Today is the anniversary of his death. Isn't us doing this very disrespectful to him? You." I endured my panting and closed my eyes. "Simply unfilial. Are you talking about me to him or to you?" Albert pinched my chin, turning my face toward him. "Daddy, I'm working so hard to make you comfortable. What else do I have to do to be considered filial?" I flung his hand away forcefully. His gaze darkened, and he lowered his head to seal my lips. The night was thick and impenetrable. Branches swayed in the wind, obscuring the full moon in the sky. The moon was yellow like a half-cooked egg yolk. Blocked by branches, its light leaked down, spilling across the ground. The drug was potent. In the end, I didn't know how long I tossed and turned with him in this room. We fell asleep together from exhaustion, not even bothering to dress, entangled tightly in the most honest, naked state, as if guarding an unspeakable secret. I woke up before Albert. He lay on my chest, sleeping restlessly, his brow slightly furrowed. I touched his hair, gently pushed him away, and got out of bed to dress. The skin on both sides of my chest was a bit raw, stinging as the shirt fabric rubbed against it. Albert seemed to always like biting that spot. I sped up getting dressed. Walking out of the bedroom, I realized it was night again, though I didn't know the exact time. After that storm of passion, the house was a mess. Going downstairs, I stumbled over clothes thrown on the stairs and almost fell. Edmund's black and white photo lay on the floor. I didn't even remember when it had fallen from the wall. The glass was shattered inside the frame, cutting his eternal smile into fragments. I sighed, picked up the photo and put it away, then sat on the sofa and lit a cigarette. Half a pack later, as I threw the last butt into the ashtray, I finally made the call. "Get ready," I said. "Send Albert away tonight." Chapter 5. Albert and I haven't seen each other for 3 years. After that chaotic night 3 years ago, I had the doctor inject him with a sedative to put him into a deep sleep, and then I put him on a plane. In truth, I had already prepared everything for his departure long before that. I had originally intended to discuss it with him properly, but later realized we would never reach an agreement. So, sooner or later made no difference. He had to go. To prevent him from sneaking back, I had my people confiscate his documents. I thought he would make a fuss once he arrived abroad, but unexpectedly, he was abnormally obedient and accepted all my arrangements. The only thing was, he refused to ever contact me again. I sent him away, but I never intended to cut ties with him. I still wanted to care about his life occasionally, like an elder, but he wouldn't even answer my calls. He had said that if I didn't want him, he wouldn't want me either. Perhaps he was truly living up to his word. Later, the news coming from across the ocean said he was doing very well there. He was studying hard, getting excellent grades, making plenty of new friends, and leading an interesting life. It seemed my worries were superfluous. When I missed him the most, I flew over to take a look at him. Really, just a look. It was snowing heavily at the time. Sitting in the car, I saw him holding a few books, running into the school gates through the snow. There was a long flight of steps at the school entrance. A girl wearing a beret chased after him with an umbrella. Just as she was about to catch up, she tripped on the steps. He immediately reached out to steady her. The girl looked up at him and smiled. A handsome boy and a beautiful girl, amidst the swirling snow. It looked like a romantic scene from a soap opera. Then, Albert took the umbrella from the girl with the grace of a gentleman. Walking shoulder to shoulder under the umbrella, they disappeared from my sight. I rolled up the car window. This was good. The mistake had finally been corrected. This was the youth Albert was supposed to have. I flew back that same night. As the turn of the century approached and doomsday rumors were everywhere, a friend returning from abroad suddenly brought me an unbelievable piece of news. He said he saw someone there who looked very much like Edmund. I packed my luggage as fast as I could and crossed the border alone. On the way, I kept telling myself not to get my hopes up too high. After all, Edmund's black and white photo had been hanging on the wall for nearly 9 years. I was still thinking this even a second before I found that small town, that street, and that barbershop. Until I walked in. The man in a black shirt, head bowed as he cut someone's hair, looked up at me and said, "Welcome, here for a haircut." The look in his eyes was unfamiliar, as if he were looking at an ordinary customer, a stranger who had accidentally walked into his shop on a sunny afternoon. But I knew it was Edmund. Those affectionate eyes hadn't changed. They just bore a few more traces of time. The faint scar on his right cheek was still there. That was from a long time ago, so long it felt like a previous life when he took a knife for me. I tried hard to suppress the agitation in my heart and said, "Yeah, a haircut." Edmund, however, called over another young barber. I asked, "Are you the boss? Can I wait for you to cut it?" A flash of surprise passed through Edmund's eyes, but he soon smiled. "Sure, take a seat first. I'll be done with this one soon." I didn't know if this counted as finding him. He had amnesia. He didn't remember me at all. For the better part of the next month, I came to the neighborhood almost every day. Sometimes for a hair wash, sometimes to coincidentally bump into him at a fast food joint and chat. He probably thought I was a bit strange, but he was always polite to me. Until one night, just as he was closing up shop, a motorcycle roared past, and a woman's scream suddenly pierced the air. Ah, my necklace! I had heard there were many purse snatchers in this coastal area. I instinctively wanted to give chase, but Edmund had already hopped onto his motorcycle and shouted at me, "Get on!" I quickly jumped onto the back seat. With the throttle cranked to the max, I hugged Edmund's waist, the wind stinging my eyes. The streetscape and time were both flying backward rapidly. 1 second felt like a year, 2 seconds like 2 years, until we retreated to a certain moment in the past, when we used to speed along the coastal highway of Port City like this, stealing a sliver of light from our gray lives. After chasing through several streets, we finally caught up with the two snatchers. Edmund forced their motorcycle to stop at a street corner. We took one each, and in the end we snatched the gold necklace back. After returning the necklace to the owner, Edmund leaned against his motorcycle, took out a pack of cigarettes, handed me one and said, "I didn't expect you to be such a good fighter." I thought to myself, of course, you taught me many of those moves back in the day. I spoke the truth. Not as good as you. He laughed, exhaled a puff of smoke, and shook his head. I'm no good anymore. These past 2 years, I felt like I'm getting old. Can't fight like I used to. In that moment, I felt incredibly sad. 9 years. How could we have been apart for 9 years? The jade-faced Yama, who could once fight from one end of an alley to the other with just a knife. The brother who went through life and death with me. The Edmund who was covered in blood, desperately telling me to survive. How could he lament that he was old? How could he see me and not know me? I remained silent for a long time before suddenly saying, "I don't think I've told you, but you look a lot like my older brother." Edmund raised an eyebrow in surprise. Biological brother? No. I looked at him earnestly. But he was my best brother. Closer than a blood brother. He was about your age. Edmund flicked the ash from his cigarette and smiled. You might not believe me if I say this, but I don't actually know exactly how old I am. 39. I said it with certainty, and he revealed a confused expression. I added, if he were still here, he should be 39 this year. Edmund laughed again, speaking with a carefree air. All right then, since we're destined to meet, maybe I really am 39. In this strange, small coastal town, the long-estranged Edmund and I shared one night of connection. It was this very night, after we helped retrieve the necklace, that he offered to buy me a drink. We sat at a noisy barbecue stall, as if returning to those countless nights at roadside stalls in Port City. After a few drinks, Edmund talked about his experiences. 8 years ago, he came here for no special reason other than following a friend to find work. He changed jobs many times. Later, he met a good master, learned the barbering trade, and finally settled down, taking over a small shop to make a living. Before coming here, he had spent nearly a year recovering from injuries in a remote fishing village. Sounds like a made-up story, right? A guy washes ashore half dead, injured and with amnesia, not knowing who he is or where he is, saved by kind fishermen. Life is sometimes that bizarre. I hesitated for a moment before asking softly, "Did you never think about recovering your memory?" Edmund took a sip of alcohol and put down his glass. When I was first recovering, I didn't have the energy to think about it. Later, I built a new life here, so it didn't matter anymore. You just don't want the people and events from the first few decades of your life? I couldn't help choking up. What if someone is still waiting for you? Edmund fell silent. Finally, he said, the first time I looked in the mirror after waking up, I was covered in scars. I don't know what happened, but my intuition told me that my previous life was probably not what I wanted. He clinked his glass against mine and downed his drink. Fate must have its reasons for arranging things this way. I've already died once. Appearing again would probably just disturb others. Looking at him, I suddenly remembered the past. We were squatting by the roadside, and I, with a cigarette in my mouth, squinted at the tall buildings in the city and said, I'm really curious what it feels like to sit in the clouds. But he didn't care. What's there to be curious about? It must be empty up that high. Not as lively as it is down here on the ground. Edmund was just like that. More than once, he had said he had no ambition, didn't want the fighting and killing, didn't want the scheming. He just wanted to live an ordinary, safe life. But life forced him onto that path, and brotherhood pushed him further and further, until he couldn't turn back. Now, he must have finally gotten the life he wanted, right? Chapter 6. Before I knew it, I was drunk. Edmund walked me back to the hotel. My steps were unsteady, and I tripped on the foot of the bed, pulling him down with me. I clutched his shirt, refusing to let him get up, and asked in a daze, "Edmund, are you happy now?" He said, "I'm not Edmund. What if you were? Would you be happy? How can there be a what if?" He sounded helpless. "All right, I'm living a good life." "Really? Really?" I felt his steady and powerful heartbeat. My eyes stung, and tears welled up. Yes, he was alive. That was enough. I let go of my hand. Edmund hesitated for a moment before saying, "Maybe I have no right to say this, but you should let go too. No matter what role that person played in your life, once you've said goodbye, you have to look forward." I was stunned. "But I always feel like I owe him," he said. "People always owe each other something. If he didn't owe you, how could you have shared life and death?" It was very late that night, and Edmund was also dizzy from the alcohol, so he stayed. I had booked a standard room with 2 beds. He slept on the other one, separated from me by a narrow aisle. In the darkness, I looked at his silhouette, feeling like this night was the closure fate had granted me. Some things, some people eventually have to come to an end. The next morning, Edmund got up very early. He needed to go home to freshen up, so he said goodbye, grabbed his jacket, and left. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" As soon as the door opened, his surprised and wary voice drifted in. I had just finished brushing my teeth in the bathroom. Putting down the cup, I walked out and looked up, only to lock eyes with the young man standing outside the door, staring expressionlessly at Edmund. "Albert!" Albert watched Edmund and Carlos enter the hotel room and sat outside the door for the entire night. A few days ago, he learned from a slip of the tongue by the old butler that his father might not be dead. He then traveled non-stop for over 20 hours, finally arriving in this city. He had been angry with Carlos for 3 years, mentally preparing himself for 3 years, but in the end, he was defeated by the fear of loss. He remembered the day he woke up 10,000 meters in the sky 3 years ago. Outside the airplane window, the clouds were tinged with pale gold, and beneath them was a pure blue. The view was blindingly bright, just like his instantly blank mind. He asked the old butler who was accompanying him abroad, "Where is this?" As soon as he asked, he felt stupid. Where was this? On a plane. This plane was carrying him away from Carlos. He even knew the destination. It was a distant country, more than 10,000 kilometers from Carlos. A distance his legs couldn't measure, his eyes couldn't reach. Yet Carlos said there was a broader world there. Said, "I'm doing this for your own good." How could Carlos forget? They had said they would depend on each other for life. Separated by a vast sea of people, how could they depend on each other? Albert sat numbly, thinking it didn't matter. His legs were his own, he could go back. He never expected Carlos to be so cruel as to hide his documents. The meaning was clear. Without permission, he could never return. That day, Albert squatted in front of his ransacked luggage and cried. It wasn't that he hadn't expected to be sent abroad eventually. He just hated that Carlos didn't even give him a proper goodbye, casually stripping away his freedom to see him. It was his fault. He had acted willfully regardless of the consequences just once, and then he lost everything completely. For these 3 years, Albert tried hard to prove he could live well without Carlos. He made more friends, thinking the hole in his heart could be filled by others. If one wasn't enough, then 2 or 3. He even tried dating, but it didn't work. He found he didn't seem to love men or women. When those people chased him and his beautiful face with infatuated gazes, his heart felt only a blank confusion. Keith had once said that defying worldly norms was true love. But Albert still didn't understand love or the lack of it. Worldly norms had nothing to do with him. He just didn't know how to be the closest to Carlos. From birth, Albert never understood what security was. His mother made him call her sister, and refused to hug him. The first time his father saw him, he said, "How do I know if he's my son?" That day, the young Albert stood between Edmund and Abby, looking up only to see 2 blank faces. What were this man and woman saying? And who were they to him? Then Carlos appeared. Albert could clearly see his smiling face, clearly hear his voice. He crouched down in front of him and said, "It's noisy here. Uncle will take you outside to play. Okay?" Carlos was only 17 then, holding his hand, calling himself uncle. Albert couldn't say exactly when Carlos stopped being just Uncle Carlos in his heart. Everything in the world has a cause and effect, except for feelings which seem to come from nowhere. During puberty, many people around him started dating, some serious, some just playing around. In short, they all projected their half-concealed desires onto others. Albert listened to them chat, never understanding the charm of kissing and hugging that made people so obsessed. Until he was 16, when he accidentally opened the bathroom door while Carlos was showering. When Carlos, standing under the water, looked at him in surprise, he suddenly understood why someone would feel possessive about another person's body. He didn't just want to kiss Carlos's lips. He wanted to kiss him all over. An endless dissatisfaction arose spontaneously, a hunger that ordinary relationships and touches could not satisfy. It wasn't that Albert didn't want to give Carlos peace of mind. He had even been afraid that going too far would cause Carlos to sever their relationship completely. He had tried very hard to relieve this craving in his own way. But compared to Carlos, other people and things were like nutrients his body couldn't absorb. Albert had been starving for 3 years, almost unable to hold on, until he heard that Edmund had reappeared. It was like a dying man suddenly bursting with a strong will to survive. He had to return to Carlos's side immediately right now. The old butler knew he was unhappy. Hearing he wanted to return, he sighed but eventually found the documents and gave them to him. After arriving, Albert searched the streets for them. He felt like he had been running, as if he had never stopped. Halfway there, he collided head-on with a tricycle at a street corner. The honest middle-aged driver turned pale with fright, but Albert didn't stop. He scrambled up and continued running. He didn't notice he was covered in dust, with multiple scrapes on his palms and knees. His senses had temporarily blocked all of this out. Finally, he found where Carlos was staying. But he saw Edmund, the father who had been buried with honors 6 years ago, with his arm around Carlos, the two of them walking into the hotel together. Albert's blood seemed to freeze instantly. He felt no joy at his father's resurrection, only wishing he was still a square tombstone. Heaven knew how treasonous this thought was. Albert followed them in a trance, reaching the room door, but suddenly lost the courage to knock. He thought, did Carlos finally get his wish? Did Edmund, who hated homosexuality, finally fall for a man? It wasn't surprising because Carlos was just that good. So good, and after that, would they live happily ever after, while he became a complete outsider, abandoned once again? Winter had just arrived in this city. Albert sat curled up in the freezing hallway all night without realizing it, until the door behind him opened. The creak awakened him, and also awakened his fighting spirit. What did he travel thousands of miles for? To be their doorman? Albert stood up abruptly. Chapter 7. Edmund looked at Albert in confusion. My heart tightened, terrified that he might spot something in Albert's face, which bore a resemblance to his own. I quickly said, "We're acquaintances. It's fine. You should go back now." Edmund didn't say anything more. He gave Albert one last look and left. I dragged Albert into the room. I didn't know what had happened, but he looked wretched, with significant scrapes on his face. I couldn't help but raise my hand to gently touch his cheek. "How did you get like this? What happened?" Albert pursed his lips and looked at me, expressionless. But after blinking a few times, the rims of his eyes turned red. "Did you sleep with him? What? Did you kiss? Did you have sex?" Before I could answer, he suddenly lashed out. His thumb rubbed forcefully across my lips, wiping them repeatedly as if trying to erase something, and then he kissed me fiercely. During the kiss, he even ripped the buttons off my shirt. Whether it was sleep deprivation or my heart softening after a 3-year separation, I couldn't break free when he tackled me onto the bed. A chill hit my chest as he tore open my shirt, his cold hands creeping up my skin. "Where did he kiss you?" "Here." His fingertips scraped across my chest. "Here." His palms stroked over my waist and abdomen. "Or here." His hand reached the waistband of my trousers, intending to go lower. I pinned him down firmly, my voice hoarse. "Stop making a scene." Albert behaved for only a moment before burying his head in my chest again, sucking hard. I shivered uncontrollably, grabbed a handful of his hair, and glared at him. "Do you not understand human speech?" He remained expressionless. "Why are you so sensitive? Did he not satisfy you last night? Damn it. It was like talking to a brick wall. Is that the only thing in your brain?" I was thoroughly enraged. "Get off." "Then what are you thinking about right now?" "I'm curious too." Albert took off his clothes and used his shirt to tie my wrists together. Then, bending one leg, he knelt on the bed. Under my furious gaze, he slowly unzipped his pants all the way down. Albert was absolutely insane. Only when he had stripped completely did I realize that it wasn't just his face. There were bruises and scrapes all over his body. I asked him, "What the hell happened to you?" He said lightly, "Nothing. Got hit by a car." "What do you mean hit by a fuck?" The sudden stimulation made my voice crack, and I couldn't help but curse aloud. Albert said, okay. It wasn't until I was gripping the sheets, feeling like my heart was about to pound out of my chest, that I belatedly realized what he was saying okay to. He had actually taken my expletive as a command. You motherfucker. Haven't seen you in years, and you come back just to kill me? I was nearly losing my mind, no longer caring about my language. I used to want so badly to be a proper elder in front of Albert, but now, being manipulated by him in bed like this, it really felt like I'd had enough of pretending and was ready to just fall from grace. But don't you like it very much? Albert suddenly flipped me over, looking down at me from above. You can make me leave now, Carlos. Do you want me to leave? I rasped. Get out. Fine. Albert sneered and actually pulled away to leave. I was burning with a fire that had nowhere to vent. I lit a cigarette and watched him bend down to pick up his scattered clothes. Motherfucker. Does a little mad dog think he can put on a handsome human skin, put on some clothes, and pretend to be a good person? Who is he trying to fool? I was pissed. Pissed. I was so fucking pissed. I yanked him backward violently. As Albert fell onto the bed, I immediately flipped over and straddled his waist. I pressed the cigarette butt down, burning a hole right through his clothes. Albert frowned but didn't speak. I gritted my teeth and said, Albert, did you really think I wouldn't lose my temper with you? So disrespectful. Is this how I raised you? As if he thought I wasn't angry enough, Albert retorted, I don't remember you teaching me anything. Then you'd better learn well today. I narrowed my eyes, emphasizing every word. I am going to teach you thoroughly how to be a gentleman in bed. Albert was thoroughly educated by me. To punish him, I controlled things so he didn't get to finish. After I was done, I threw him into the bathroom and told him to solve it himself while showering. Who knew that the moment he came out of the bathroom, wrapped in steam, he would faint? It scared the hell out of me. The doctor said it was extreme physical exhaustion, combined with a cold, fever, and hypoglycemia. After calling the old butler to understand the situation and calculating the time, I realized just how long he had been running nonstop to get back here. After Albert woke up, I fed him porridge. His face was pale, and he stared at me fixedly with those bottomless black eyes, which just made me angry all over again. I snapped, Are you really not going to give me any face, young master? Only then did he lower his head and open his mouth to accept the spoon I offered. I said, Not eating or drinking for over 20 hours. Running here to get hit by a car. Getting a fever. What are you acting out a melodrama for me? Albert remained silent. I know you rely on being young and fit, not caring about injuries or pain, but is youth meant to be squandered like this? You were lucky this time that the car only grazed you. What if you had internal injuries? What if it's a big truck next time? You never used to be this reckless. Albert, look at me. Albert had been keeping his eyes lowered. Hearing this, he looked up at me again. He actually dared to show an aggrieved expression. He said, I was just afraid you didn't want me anymore. Those words were like a needle, instantly popping the balloon of my anger. He pursed his lips. You and him. Nothing happened. I interrupted him, knowing what he wanted to say. Besides, your father has amnesia. He doesn't remember me, and he doesn't remember you. Once you recover, we'll go back. No one is to disturb him ever again. Amnesia. Albert paused, then asked, Can you bear to leave him? I said, He has the life he wants here, and I've moved on. What does moved on mean? I stirred the porridge in the bowl with the spoon. Moving on means it's completely in the past. Complete farewell. Do you understand? Albert blinked. So, are you going to eat this porridge or not? Yes. Chapter 8. A week later, Albert had fully recovered. We set off for home. Before leaving, I went to Edmund's barbershop to say goodbye, perhaps to hug him for the last time in this life. Thank you for taking care of me during this time. I'm very glad to have met you. That was probably the last thing I would ever say to him. During the farewell, Albert didn't step forward. He just stood at the street corner diagonally across from us, watching from a distance. When I returned to his side, he said, You still look very reluctant to leave him. I shook my head with a sigh. You don't understand. My feelings for Edmund are complicated. It's not just romantic love like you think. So you finally admit you loved him. At this point, there was no point in denying it. I shrugged. I liked him when I was young. It was just unrequited love. Not worth mentioning. We walked in silence for a while before Albert suddenly said, Is he old? He's very different from before. I thought that maybe he, too, had once longed to be close to his father. Heaven just hadn't given them the destiny to be father and son. Do you hate him? I asked. Hearing this, a moment of confusion appeared on Albert's face, but he soon said decisively, I hate him. I hated him the most when you would stare at his photo in a daze, unable to hear me calling you. I shouldn't have asked. In the last month of 1999, I returned home. On Christmas Eve, Albert was invited to a dance and came back noticeably drunk. I was checking accounts in the study when he walked in, sat on the sofa opposite my desk, and fixed his gaze straight on me. I continued flipping through the ledger, ignoring him. Come here, he said suddenly. I looked up at him, a trace of a smile on my lips. Quite the lordly airs, young master. Are you ordering me? His voice softened immediately. Carlos, come here. You're really getting more and more unruly. Still, I got up and went to sit beside him. He looked especially sharp tonight in a fitted black suit. No tie, the collar fastened with a collar bar. A thin chain swayed gently below his Adam's apple, shimmering faintly. Just as I was about to reach out and touch the chain, I noticed faint traces of foundation and lipstick on his suit jacket. It wasn't very obvious on the dark fabric, but I still spotted it. I leaned in and sniffed. Seems you had a beautiful lady for company tonight. It was a fresh, elegant perfume. Not bad. Albert's reaction was half a beat slow. He seemed to think for a moment before whispering, Probably Jessie. Oh, I nodded. The girl with the sweet voice. Albert hurriedly explained, There's nothing between us. She just said she was really going to give up on me and hoped I could give her one last hug. I reached out to wipe away the trace of makeup, teasing, You're not usually someone so easily soft-hearted. Albert paused, then said, But we're in the same boat. We're both chasing someone we shouldn't chase. His expression darkened. I poured him a glass of warm water. He drank a few mouthfuls, then suddenly remembered something and looked at me strangely. How do you know Jessie has a sweet voice? Ah! I hadn't expected him to ask that and was momentarily tongue-tied. I had just said it casually. I didn't think the kid would be so sharp even when drunk. Just heard it from others. Heard it from who? I only met her after going abroad. You couldn't possibly know her. From the butler and the others. I made an excuse. You were alone in such a faraway place. Of course, I had to be concerned about your situation, including what friends you made. Is a sweet voice such an important characteristic? Worth them mentioning specifically? Albert wasn't stupid. He wouldn't be easily fooled. He leaned forward, closing in on me, his gaze intense. Did you go there? Did you see her? Did you hear her speak? I fell silent. Yes. In truth, over these few years, I had gone to City L to see him many times. He refused to take my calls, but I was too worried to let it go. So I had flown over again and again. I didn't want him to know. I had always thought time and distance could change everything, and I didn't want him to think there was any possibility of me responding to his feelings. But 3 years had passed, and it seemed that idea was wrong. Seeing I didn't speak, Albert switched questions. In these 3 years, did you think of me? He continued, I thought of you. Every day. While eating, while in class, while walking, even in my dreams. I once thought I could slowly stop thinking about you, just as you wished, but I couldn't control myself. I couldn't do it. My heart softened instantly. All right, I really couldn't hold out anymore. I admit it. I went to see you, and I missed you very much too. Albert's eyes lit up immediately. Then can you initiate a kiss just once? I finally granted his wish. I reached out, pulled the thin chain swaying at his collar, and kissed him. Life is so long after all. Romance is but a small matter. Admitting I had feelings for him wouldn't stop the sun from rising or the city from standing. If anyone insisted on condemning us, then let them be. On the last night of 1999, Albert clung to me, insisting we spend it together. At midnight, the so-called doomsday didn't arrive. As the century turned, a once-in-a-thousand-years event, the whole city cheered. The moment the fireworks bloomed, Albert kissed me, his tongue entangled with mine, his fierce heartbeat resonating with my own. In this cross-century moment, it was as if we had melted into one. Just as I was exhausted and about to fall asleep, I suddenly felt a cold touch on my fingertip. Albert had slipped a ring onto the index finger of my right hand. I opened my hand to look at it and asked with a smile, My old ring really was hidden by you, wasn't it? Albert looked down at me and asked, I didn't throw it away. Do you still want it? I yawned. Forget it. Wearing so many rings is a hassle. It's your dad's stuff. You keep it yourself. Albert smiled, kissed me, and lay down beside me, his hand restlessly toying with my eyelashes. I smiled with my eyes closed and reached out to pull him into my arms. Go to sleep, baby. Happy 21st century. If you enjoyed this story, remember to subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much.